Howdy. Welcome to Ausgrave Royalty. I am Justin. Today we're on part 3 of our examination of Bolen's gods and goddesses. We're talking about Poseidon today. Last time we talked about Artemis, and I had 9 pages of notes for Artemis, and now I have 6 for Poseidon, so much more manageable as far as time management. So hopefully we'll get through this a bit at a slightly more relaxed pace, but only slightly. If you're new to the channel, I make videos on big ideas. The big ideas we're doing lately have been archetypal psychology. What qualifies as a great idea? Simply just something I'm interested in at the time that I think might be useful for other people. So check out my other videos if you're interested in that. I make comedy videos every Sunday. I have a gaming channel, which is poised for some development. I'm going to be making a game in Unreal Engine. I guess it sounds a little all over the place and unfocused, but I like to think there's a method to the madness. So welcome to the channel. In these videos, we are not so much focused on the mythology, but more of the psychology. Of course, I'd love to incorporate everything, but that's out of scope for one mere mammal such as myself. So we are looking at this book right here, Gods and Everyman by Bolen, and all the material is drawn from that book. So last time we covered Zeus as far as the gods, and Poseidon is the second of what she designates as the father archetypes. Archetypes whose concern is that of a dominion of a realm of some sort. In this case, it's the sea. For Zeus, it was the sky. And she says biological fatherhood and the father archetypes are not related. What does that mean? It means that when we talk about a father archetype, we're not talking about this father with these qualities or that father with those qualities. We're talking about what it means to be fathered as a principle. And this is we talked about this a lot more in season 1 when we covered Archetypes by Dr. Anthony Stevens. So check out season 1 for more on that. I think there's actually a video called The Father Archetype. Something like that. I should really know my own videos, but I'm moving forward, baby. So Bolen says Poseidon and Hades are shadow aspects of Zeus, those parts of the father archetype that men in power suppress or ignore, as well as being two separate patterns. So I want to pause here for a quick second. I feel like I unfortunately have to give this disclaimer. I don't know, new viewers might come in. When we're covering Bolen, she's writing in she's writing in the 80s. So when she uses terms like men in power or patriarchy or feminism or things like that, I think those terms were more gentler in those days than they are. There's arguments to be made that they've kind of become corrosive and corrupted in contemporary times. Let me know in the comments below what y'all think about that. But I tend to just see the best in Bolen and think that she means well when she uses those terms. So just want to read a quick introduction here from the book. Poseidon lived under the sea, the kingdom that became his when he and his brothers Zeus and Hades drew lots to divide up the world. To grasp the emotionality that he personifies and the psychological domain he rules, we need only think of the powerful moods of the sea. It can be turbulent, with roaring waves that indiscriminately batter everything in its path with tremendous destructive force. Like intense emotional affect, that floods the personality and drowns rationality. Poseidon would arise from his undersea residence and rage, and then retreat once more to his underwater home. He was also called the Floodbringer and Earthshaker, to express the enormous, disturbing, and destructive power of nature and human nature. The sea in dreams and metaphor represents the unconscious. In its shallows, just below the surface, lie the emotions and memories that are readily retrievable and personal. In its dark depths are primitive creatures in myriad forms beyond what can be personally known, the collective unconscious. Water and emotions are linked symbolically, which makes the sea an apt realm for Poseidon, who reacted emotionally and intensely when he was provoked. His symbolic animal was the horse, which often represents the power and beauty of physical instincts, and a land animal attesting to Poseidon's pre-Olympian origins as an earth father god. As will become clear when we meet Hades, the underworld also represents the personal and collective unconscious. The undersea is the realm of repressed personal feelings and instincts, and the emotional realm, when we humans share collectively. Families of Poseidon men often know this aspect of the father archetype in its most frightening form, when his raw feelings erupt and raging emotions periodically flood the household. The patriarchal culture allows fathers as lord and master of their households to unleash fury there, and often nowhere else. Times have changed. That was me, that not from the book. Back to the book. Although we may have been the recipients of Father Poseidon's emotionality, especially an alcoholic father, it may also exist in ourselves. Anyone who has found him or herself unexpectedly overwhelmed by waves of intense feelings that well up from the depths, or has had his or her body tremble and shake with grief or rage or revenge, has had a first-hand experience of Poseidon. We are trained in this world, ruled by Zeus, to devalue and submerge our feelings and instincts, to keep a lid on them if we can. That hasn't changed. That was me again. And if we are like rational Apollo or a cool-thinking Athena, we repress feelings very well, up to a point. We often dream of tidal waves or floods, and obsessive fears of earthquakes, when Poseidon's world threatens to break through the defenses erected against feeling our feelings and expressing them. But even in a world dominated by Zeus, some people know Poseidon's realm well. They are like sailors who go down to the sea in ships, or people who would not dream of living anywhere else but next to the sea. These men and women live and work with the tides of emotion and instinct. For example, I think, let's skip that last part. Okay. Yeah, just a quick little introduction. So in these videos, another disclaimer, first of all, we're talking about a god here and the god's traits and how one might relate to these god's traits that Poseidon personifies. But men and women can both identify with all the gods and goddesses. We all have all the archetypes. Men can typically access the feminine archetypes through their anima. Women can access the masculine archetypes through their animus. So the theory goes from Carl Jung. So when we talk about his anger or he's feeling this emotional intensity, it can be women too. And vice versa, when we talk about the goddesses, men can identify with those qualities as well. So, FYI. Another thing is, like, I'm dividing these videos into first half-ish. It's played out as 3/4-ish, but I try for half-ish. It's going to be like information about the god or goddess, and then the later half, my reactions, and how this god or goddess has played a part in my life in some way. So, Bolen articulates two fundamental characteristics of the Poseidon archetype. She says, quote, "Imagine looking out at a placid sea and knowing that an emotional, angry, and resentful God lives under the surface, who may erupt in fury and pound against whatever is in his way. And you will immediately grasp some of the main characteristics of the Poseidon archetype." I'm going to pause here as well. We're going to be talking about the Poseidon man or the Poseidon woman. When we say that, we're talking about like if someone existed as an epitome of the god or goddess. No one is one of the goddesses or gods 100%. That being said, this is an exercise in identifying traits we may or may not have, and then which hopefully will cause a moment of self-reflection, thus improving self-knowledge, thus bettering your own life and the lives of those around you. That's the mission here. The point is, it's like Robert Moore said this from season 2. You don't want to identify with an archetype 100%. They're too pure. They're radioactive, as he would say, and they're imperialistic. Each one of the archetypes wants all of you. And the healthy ego is like the chairman of the board, and the gods and goddesses are sitting around stating their case. And as a healthy ego, your duty is to hear them out, make and thread the needle, and come to the best conclusion you can for your own life, doing the best you can. An unhealthy ego, at worst, could be unseated by an archetype, pushed out of the chair, and now Poseidon takes the board. And then you'll have all the Poseidon outcomes. You'll be incredibly emotional and wreak havoc, you know? So this is just getting a background on each individual voice at that board meeting, so to speak. FYI. So she continues here. Poseidon is also the archetype through which a psychological realm of great depth and beauty can be known. Poseidon's undersea world cannot be seen from Mount Olympus, and it was not described in Greek mythology. Access to emotional depths is an unappreciated aspect of men's psyches, and it is devalued and repressed in patriarchal cultures. Poseidon as deep sea diver. Quote, "Poseidon is also a metaphor for the man or a woman who can go deeply into the realm of feelings and emotions and gain access to what is down there, soul and sorrow, great beauty and monsters of the deep, places so deep and so dark that clear vision is no longer possible, and one can only dimly sense what is there. The deep sea diver aspect of the Poseidon archetype, in contrast, is expressed by the poet, playwright, novelist, composer, musician, or psychotherapist who is drawn time and time again to descend deeper into the realm of emotions, where he or she taps into collective human depth. Poseidon is archetype of the king. And we talked about the king in last season with Robert L. Moore and Douglas Gillette. The term the king doesn't translate 100%, I don't think, but it's worth keeping in mind. Similar to Zeus, the Poseidon man feels a drive to be somebody important. However, he lacks the impersonality and strategic thinking of Zeus. Poseidon repeatedly lost contested land to other deities, was publicly humiliated, and reacted in anger. And Bolen describes those of the Poseidon archetype are not good losers. As trident bearer. And as I say, like, as this, it's like Justin as a human, Justin as a man, Justin as a 9-to-5 worker, Justin as a YouTuber. Like, I have all these different dimensions to my existence, and that's what is meant by, like, as trident bearer and all that. So, FYI. As trident bearer. The trident originally symbolized the three goddess aspects of very ancient religions, that of maiden, mother, and crone. Poseidon, being the trident bearer, represents his ability to fertilize all three of those aspects, metaphorically. Quote, as her mate, over the duration of a lifetime, he is husband to the maiden he married, then to the mother of his children, and in old age to the woman she becomes. In its most abstract meaning, Poseidon is the husband of Earth, as life-giving moisture that is needed for Earth to be fertile, as the implacable enemy. Poseidon holds grudges and never forgets, as we've all seen with his torment of Odysseus. Bolen cites Charles Bronson in Death Wish. Just shows when she's writing, right? I would say like Liam Neeson in Taken. As an example of like the rageful state that Poseidon can get into. As the wild man. The great author Robert Bly, who we'll eventually get to on this channel, wrote about the wild man from the Grimm fairy tale Iron Hans in his book Iron John, which is highly recommended. This was a man found at the bottom of a pool in the forest by a huntsman. Bolen sees this as a Poseidon image, a rejected, devalued, and repressed archetype in the unconscious. It's the rage of being misunderstood. So she has these cool passages about the life story of a Poseidon man. So like hypothetically, if there were a child born that was like very just Poseidon-esque, so to speak, this is how kind of things would play out. Bolen describes the Poseidon individual as being someone who is deeply emotional and yet stuck in a society that devalues emotion, especially men. A Poseidon child will feel strongly about everything that matters to him. He has a hunger for what he wants and howls with frustration and anger when he can't have it right now. If afraid of the punitive punishment that may result from his outbursts, he may bury them in the still waters run deep way. He is very exuberant, always ready to help out, but makes messes and is always told to clean up. He's often criticized for not meeting people's expectations. Hopefully, a child like this is born into a family temperamentally suited for him, one which welcomes the drama, tears, and laughter, and who are physically demonstrative. A household that tolerates the clutter that collects when many individuals do many different things in various states of completion. Those are Bolen's words. I like that phrase. That's kind of like my apartment, actually. If the household is not like this, the child will be reprimanded often. He'll be constantly cleaning up his messes, and there'll be a strictness when it comes to completing chores. He'll also be told, big boys don't cry, or don't act silly. He'll have to shape himself accordingly, as he's not accepted for who he is. In adolescence, he wants to sow his wild oats at the moment that he's being told to focus on school and grades, which don't interest him in the slightest. Quote, the beauty of logic escapes him. He dislikes analytic or repetitious work, hates test taking, and finds most of the required courses boring. If he doesn't do well in school and ends up being held back in one way or another, he'll be resentful at being left out. Bolen notes that this sort of pattern may occur elsewhere in his life as well. In work, it is ideal for the Poseidon individual to find employment that is meaningful to him. Granted, this is a challenge in our corporate left brain world. I would agree there. With women, Bolen notes that two aspects make it likely that he will dominate women: his patriarchal attitude and the power of his emotional intensity. Bolen describes that he may have trouble when competing against women. These types have trouble with today's Athena-minded women who are also strong but can think strategically where he cannot. In terms of emotional intensity, the Poseidon man may be a boundary breacher, physically or otherwise. With other men, he's not very popular. Interestingly, the Poseidon man is not usually picked on, but usually just gets left out. However, Poseidon men sometimes form close, long-lasting ties with a man who is his psychological opposite, each drawn towards the possibility of developing what is unconscious in himself. In terms of sexuality, many women married to Poseidon men find that his sexual appetite comes first, regardless of what is on her mind or weighing on her heart. He tends to lose himself in urges, completely taken over by feeling. In marriage, Poseidon can really bring a lot to the table if he can attune himself to someone on a deep level. If he can marry a woman that has this effect on him, they will live in a beautiful undersea palace, be together in emotional depth. I just got a vision of Nicolas Cage and Mandy in the movie Mandy, one of my all-time favorites, by the way, just under Fifth Element and Chinatown for me. But yeah, it reminds me of kind of their bond. And, you know, Nick Cage, emotional outbursts. Maybe there's Poseidon there. I don't know. Bolen articulates a few outcomes that can happen to Poseidon individuals in midlife. If he has a family, it will usually be the center of his attention. Usually these types will have achieved some sort of high material status in their job, which are the envy of others around them, but are in danger of having an emotional breakdown as these gains mean little to him personally. He did what society told him to do and may unravel that he didn't stay true to himself. In regards to his later years, Bolen says, quote, "The highest human potential for living out this archetype is represented by the image of Poseidon himself in his chariot, drawn by his white-maned horses, calming the sea, with creatures from the deep frolicking around him. This Poseidon man or woman can descend into the deep sea where he is at home, and can express its beauty and serenity, unafraid of what others consider monsters that lurk in dark palaces. These horses represent his tumultuous instincts. If they're successfully tamed, he'll really be fulfilled." Psychological difficulties. As we've spoken about, the main problem, plaguing the Poseidon man or woman is that of reconciling one's nature to the demands and expectations that the external world forces on him or her throughout their lives. This can take the shape of intense emotions of rage and sorrow, mirroring the grief cycle. Basically, grief for the parts they've had to cut off to mold themselves into something externally acceptable. This can also result in a constant battle with low self-esteem. As we've talked about, people who are close with this archetype can be completely consumed with vengeance and retribution. Ways to heal. In terms of ways to heal, we've talked about the key thing already, which is reining in the powerful horses that represent Poseidon's strong instincts. Beyond that, Bolen suggests diving in, pun intended, to the creative arts, which can house and channel those strong energies into artistic forms. Also, and I really like this, Bolen says that the Poseidon archetype can be diluted, meaning that activation and cultivation of other archetypes tend to reduce the overwhelming nature of this archetype. Bolen notes that Apollo, Athena, and Zeus are especially helpful. I just like that term because I'm currently kind of obsessed with alchemy, and diluted is like an alchemical term. I have some videos on that. Check those out. That's an upcoming season, probably season 5. I'll be doing a season on alchemy. All right, and with the few minutes we have left, I have some closing remarks, and so that's like the Bolen portion. Not exactly halfway of the video, but here's my reaction and thoughts about all this. So do I see Poseidon in myself when I look inward? If I'm being honest, yes, absolutely. It's strange, though, because some aspects I definitely identify with, but other aspects not at all. For instance, when Bolen says he has no equal as a grudge holder, that doesn't resonate with me at all. I don't really hold grudges. There's one, maybe two exceptions, but I'm not consumed by them in any way. It's more like a memory I'll never forget, basically. But I'm not dwelling on it all the time, you know? In regards, Yeah, like in my romantic life, when we're talking about being consumed by emotions, I'm very emotionally controlled, I would say. Not that I don't feel deep emotions, I definitely do, but I rarely am emotional. For instance, one of my friends said to me after a series of unfortunate events in like a romantic situation, one of my friends said to me, Justin, for once in your life, it's okay to call someone a fucking bitch. And that cracked me up at the time. But that tells you like I'm always like giving, usually I give the benefit of the doubt. I try and take the high road, all that. Yes, I'm not perfect, but I've never like been consumed and just like gone on some kind of Poseidon rampage, like being described here. Maybe I have a bit of that, but it's very low level. I will say though, when I was a kid, I definitely lost my temper a lot. I was very directly competitive, played a lot of basketball, um, loved basketball, and yeah, just really competitive in everything, in games, riding bikes, super soaker, fights, all that stuff. Um, I got in some tussles when I was a kid, like 3 or 4. Um, I don't really remember what precipitated any of it, but I do remember being very emotional. uh, but I haven't been in touch with, I'm 37, so I like to think, it still exists within me, but, the consuming of it has faded, thank God. And you'll love this, like, in my like early 20s, a girl looked at me and she said, "You are the epitome of still waters run deep." And it was actually the first time I'd heard that expression. I thought it was a huge compliment. Um, but yeah, that Bolen mentioned like that about Poseidon, so thought I'd mention that here. That sounds odd out of context. It wasn't like I was walking down a hallway, turned a corner, and some woman looked at me and was like, "You are the epitome of still waters from." No, we were friends. It was, yeah. I should clarify that. Just a few minutes left. I would say it's also accurate that I do have a drive to be somebody important. I have a YouTube channel, for God's sake. I'm trying to spread the word. I'm trying to be somebody important and being the guy that sends the flare up to you guys that, hey, there's some good ideas here. And especially as opposed to the mainstream success of Zeus. I'm more, I want to have like a distinctive kind of success, not the mainstream wealth and, yeah, status, lots of like shallow relationships, a high profile network and all that. I'd rather think of something I want to create and that's individually mine, that came from me, that's pure, and then go all out on that and succeed in that. As far as dwelling on deep emotions, sorrow, rage, beauty, definitely. There are periods for everything. Of course, not 24/7, but I have my moments. Last thing here. Poseidon, she said Poseidon men often keep a deep long-term male friend who's their psychological opposite so as to develop what's unconscious in myself. And I think in the biological sphere, they call that genetic, like people are attracted to others for genetic diversity to like shore up their blind spots, I forgot I'm blanking on the term, but I have a friend like that who's kind of like, he's not even a friend, he's like a brother, and he's like my opposite. And we've had a 18-year friendship. So anyway, I'll end it here. Didn't get to all my notes, but almost all of them. Hope you all enjoyed it. Tune in for the next one. Leave comments below. Check the description, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.